The stars do not remember. That is the first truth any species must accept when they reach beyond their birth world and touch the cold vacuum between suns. The stars burn with ancient fire, indifferent to the civilizations that rise beneath their light, indifferent still when those civilizations crumble to dust. They witness the first empire to span a galaxy, and they will witness the last. They do not mourn. They do not celebrate.
They simply continue as they always have, as they always will. I have lived for 937 standard cycles. In that time, I have watched stars die. I have seen the violet bloom of supernovae paint the darkness with colors that have no names in any language. I have stood on the bridges of ships older than human history and listened to the song of creation itself echoing from the void. And in all my centuries, I never thought I would live to see the Dominion fall.
My name is Verith Solon Kai, and I am among the last of the High Chroniclers. It is my burden to record what happened. It is my shame that I did not see it coming. None of us did. We were so old, so certain of our place among the stars, that we forgot the most fundamental truth of existence. Nothing is eternal. Not stars, not empires, and certainly not the arrogance of those who believe they cannot be touched.
I am writing this from a vessel that has no name, drifting in a system that appears on no charts. There are 43 of us aboard, all that remains of a species that once numbered in the trillions. 43 souls, huddled in the darkness, waiting for a judgment that may or may not come.
The humans have not pursued us. I do not know if that brings me comfort or terror.
Perhaps both. To understand what happened, to truly comprehend the magnitude of our failure, I must take you back. Not to the war, though I will speak of that. Not to the first shots or the last. I must take you back to the moment I first saw a human with my own eyes and understood nothing of what I was looking at.
It was the delegation, the diplomatic mission that was supposed to be a formality.
The Dominion had ruled the Sagittarius Arm for 11,000 years. We had risen when humanity's ancestors were still learning to shape stone into tools. We had built our first interstellar vessels while they huddled in caves, fearing the lightning and praying to the thunder.
By the time they took their first tentative steps beyond their own moon, we had catalogued every star within 10,000 light-years, mapped every world worth colonizing, and established an order that had endured longer than their recorded history.
We watched them, of course. We watched all the young species. Most of them burned themselves to ash before they ever reached beyond their birth systems, consumed by war, greed, or the simple inability to cooperate long enough to survive. We expected humanity to follow the same pattern. Their history was violence. Their nature was chaos.
They killed each other over patches of ground, over invisible lines drawn on maps, over ideas that seemed incomprehensible to a species that had achieved unity millennia ago.
And then they didn't die. Against all probability, against every model our predictive intelligences had constructed, they survived. They unified, not completely, not peacefully, but enough. They reached their neighboring worlds. They built their first colony ships, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to spread.
The Dominion Council debated for decades about what to do with them.
Some advocated for immediate intervention, a gentle guiding hand to ensure they developed along acceptable lines. Others argued for isolation, containing them to a small sphere of influence where they could expand without threatening the established order. A few, the ones history has proven correct, suggested we simply leave them alone entirely. We chose none of these paths. We chose the one that seemed most reasonable to an empire that had never known true challenge. We chose condescension. The delegation was my idea. I am not proud of this. I proposed that we make contact, establish formal relations, and quietly ensure that humanity understood their place in the galactic hierarchy. They would be given access to certain trade routes, certain technologies deemed safe for their developmental stage, and in exchange they would recognize the Dominion's authority over all matters beyond their allocated sphere. It was the same arrangement we had offered to 100 species before them. Most accepted gratefully. Those who didn't, well, they lured. The human delegation arrived at Kalos Station on a ship that made several of my colleagues openly laugh. It was small, barely larger than one of our diplomatic shuttles. Its hull was a patchwork of different alloys, some of which we didn't immediately recognize. The design was purely functional, almost aggressively utilitarian, with none of the artistic flourishes that even the youngest spacefaring civilizations typically incorporated into their vessels. It looked like something a species would build if they had only just discovered how to weld metal in vacuum. "Is this a joke?" Ambassador Torek whispered to me as we watched the vessel dock. "They sent this to meet the Dominion?" I remember feeling a flicker of something I couldn't name, not quite unease, perhaps curiosity. The humans had been in space for nearly 4 centuries by their calendar. They had colonized dozens of worlds. They had developed faster-than-light travel independently without any guidance from older civilizations, and yet they had sent this. "Perhaps," I said carefully, "they are making a statement?" What statement could this possibly make except that they are backward? I did not answer. I was watching the airlocks cycle open. There were 5 of them, 3 males, 2 females by their biology, though I would later learn that such distinctions meant less to them than I assumed. They wore simple gray uniforms with minimal ornamentation, no jewelry, no symbols of rank that I could identify, nothing to indicate which of them was the leader. The one who stepped forward first was a female of middle years. Her hair was dark, cut short in a practical style, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds. She moved with an economy of motion that I found oddly compelling. No wasted gestures, no theatrical flourishes, just purpose. "Chronicler Solon Kai," she said, and her pronunciation of my name was nearly perfect. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez, representing the United Earth Coalition. Thank you for receiving us." Her voice was calm, controlled. There was no nervousness in it, no awe at standing aboard a station that dwarfed anything her people had ever built. She looked at me the way one might look at a business partner, respectfully, but without deference. It bothered me more than I wanted to admit. "Captain Vasquez," I replied, inclining my head in the formal greeting. "The Dominion welcomes humanity to Kalos Station. We hope this meeting will be the beginning of a productive relationship between our peoples." "As do we." There was a pause. Ambassador Torak shifted beside me, clearly expecting more, some expression of gratitude, perhaps, or wonder at their surroundings. The humans simply waited. "We have prepared accommodations for your delegation," I continued, filling the silence. "Quarters suitable for your environmental requirements. If you will follow—" "That's very kind," Captain Vasquez interrupted gently,
But we'd prefer to remain aboard our ship during our stay, if that's acceptable. We have everything we need there."
Ambassador Torek's skin flushed a deep violet, our species' equivalent of a scoff.
"Your vessel," he said, "appears to lack even basic comfort amenities. Surely you would prefer—"
"We're comfortable," the human said, and she smiled.
It was not a warm smile. It was not an aggressive smile. It was simply knowing, as if she understood something we did not, and found gentle amusement in our ignorance.
That was the first time I felt afraid of them. I didn't recognize the feeling then. I told myself it was merely irritation at their breach of protocol. But looking back now, I understand. Some part of me, some ancient instinct buried beneath 9 centuries of civilization, had recognized something in that smile.
A predator's patience. The negotiations lasted for 3 standard weeks. They were, by every objective measure, a success. The humans agreed to all of our terms. They would limit their expansion to the designated sphere. They would not develop certain classes of weapons without Dominion approval. They would submit to annual inspections of their military capabilities. They would recognize the Dominion's authority over trade routes, resource claims, and territorial disputes in the greater galactic community.
They agreed to everything, and they asked for almost nothing in return. This should have been a warning. I see that now. A species does not survive 4 centuries in the void by being agreeable. They do not spread across dozens of star systems by accepting limitation. But we were so accustomed to younger races bowing to our authority that we failed to ask the obvious question. Why were they making this so easy? "They are afraid of us," Ambassador Torek declared at our final briefing before their departure. "As they should be. They saw our fleet, our stations, the scope of our power. They understand they cannot challenge us." Several of my colleagues nodded in agreement. I remained silent. Captain Vasquez sought me out on the last evening, before her delegation returned to their small, ugly ship. I found her standing before one of the great observation windows in the diplomatic quarter, staring out at the stars. "Do you know what I find most interesting about this station, chronicler?" she asked without turning. "I'm sure there are many impressive features." "It's old." She turned to look at me. "The construction techniques, the alloys, the fundamental architecture, it's all at least 2,000 years behind what you're currently capable of. This was cutting edge once. Now it's a monument." I felt my skin color shift involuntarily. She had noticed what she was not supposed to notice.
"All civilizations preserve their history," I said carefully. "Kalos Station represents—" "When was the last time the Dominion built something new?" she asked. "Not maintained, not upgraded, built from scratch, from a new design, for a new purpose." I did not answer. I could not answer, because I did not know. And the realization of my own ignorance was deeply uncomfortable. "We ask a lot of questions," Captain Vasquez said. "It's something of a human trait. We can't help it. We see something we don't understand, and we have to know why, how, what would happen if we did it differently." She smiled again, that same quiet, knowing smile. It gets us into trouble sometimes. "I imagine it does."
"Chronicler." She hesitated, and for a moment something flickered behind her eyes, something almost like sympathy. In my culture, there's an old saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But there's a corollary that we don't talk about as often.
"Which is?"
Those who cannot imagine the future are condemned to fade from it.
She touched my arm, a gesture of connection that should have been too familiar, too presumptuous. But her hand was warm through my sleeve, and her eyes held no mockery.
I hope we meet again, Chronicler Solon Kai, under better circumstances.
She left the next morning. I watched her vessel depart through the same observation window where we had spoken, that unremarkable little ship carrying its unremarkable passengers back to their unremarkable corner of the galaxy.
I did not see her again for 73 years.
In the interim, the Dominion continued as it always had. We managed our territories, we mediated disputes between our client species, we maintained the peace that had endured for millennia. And gradually, imperceptibly, we began to forget about the humans.
They kept to their sphere as they had promised. Their annual reports were always on time, always complete, always perfectly within the boundaries we had established. They never requested exceptions. They never filed complaints. They were, by every metric we used to evaluate subject species, ideal.
Too ideal, perhaps, but no one wanted to question a success story.
I buried myself in other work. I chronicled the rise and fall of smaller powers at the edges of Dominion space. I recorded the extinction of 3 species who failed to adapt to changing conditions. I watched stars die, as I always had, and noted their passing with the appropriate solemnity. And then the Vakar came. They emerged from the galactic core like a plague-given form, billions of vessels, each one bristling with weapons we had never encountered. They spoke no language we recognized. They responded to no diplomatic overtures. They simply advanced, consuming everything in their path, converting the matter of worlds into more ships, more soldiers, more of themselves. The first Dominion fleet to engage them was vaporized in 11 minutes. The second fleet lasted slightly longer, nearly an hour before being overwhelmed. Admiral Korath, one of the finest military minds the Dominion had produced in 1,000 years, managed to transmit a final message before his flagship dissolved around him. "They don't stop," he said, and I remember the exhaustion in his voice, the incomprehension. They don't negotiate, they don't retreat, they just keep coming. There are so many of them. Where did they all come from? We would never learn the answer. The Vakar did not explain themselves. They simply destroyed. In the first year of the war, we lost 400 billion citizens. In the second year, we lost the inner colonies, the oldest, most developed worlds in our territory, including the planet where I was born. In the third year, the Dominion Council began discussing terms of surrender. There were no terms to discuss. The Vakar did not want tribute. They did not want territory. They did not want anything except our annihilation. I was present at the emergency session where Ambassador Torek, now first speaker of the Council, proposed the unthinkable. We must ask the humans for assistance.
The chamber erupted. I had never witnessed such chaos in a formal proceeding. Counselors who had served together for centuries turned on each other, shouting accusations of cowardice, of weakness, of betraying everything the Dominion represented.
"They are primitives," one voice bellowed above the others. "What could they possibly offer?"
"Their sphere has not been touched," First Speaker Torek replied, his voice weary. "While we have been fighting, they have been preparing. Our intelligence suggests they have expanded significantly beyond their original boundaries."
"In violation of the treaty."
Yes, Torek's skin was the gray of utter exhaustion. And we are in no position to enforce it. We are in no position to enforce anything. The Vakar will reach our core systems within 8 months. If we do not find allies, there will be no Dominion left to preserve.
The vote was narrow, but it passed.
I was chosen to lead the delegation. I suspect it was because I had made first contact decades earlier, and because no one else wanted the humiliation of begging a lesser species for help. I accepted the assignment without protest. Pride had become a luxury we could no longer afford. The journey to human space took 3 weeks. The route was circuitous. We had to avoid the advancing Vekar front, which now stretched across a third of the galactic arm. Along the way, I watched the feeds from our remaining outposts, the desperate battles and inevitable retreats. I counted the worlds we lost. I learned to sleep with the sound of casualty reports in my ears, because silence had become unbearable. When we finally crossed into human territory, I expected to find chaos, refugees, fear, the same desperate scramble for survival that characterized our own failing civilization. Instead, I found order. The border station that received us was larger than I had anticipated. Not grand, nothing about it was grand, but efficient, practical. Dozens of vessels moved through its docking bays with mechanical precision, their movements coordinated by systems I couldn't quite analyze. The humans who greeted us were polite, professional, and utterly calm.
Chronicler Solon Kai, the station commander said. She was young for her rank, barely into what humans called middle age. We've been expecting you. A representative from the coalition government will arrive within the hour. Is there anything you need in the meantime?
I stared at her. You've been expecting us? Yes, sir. We've been tracking the war's progression for some time. We assumed you would reach out eventually. She paused, studying my face. You look tired. We have guest quarters prepared, if you'd like to rest.
I didn't know how to process what she was saying. They had been watching, they had been waiting, and they were offering me rest, as if this were a routine diplomatic visit rather than a desperate plea from a dying civilization. How long have you known?
About the Vekar. We detected their emergence approximately 4 years ago, shortly after your initial contact with them. She spoke as if this were common knowledge, as if their surveillance of our territory were perfectly normal. We've been monitoring the situation closely.
And you did nothing?
Something flickered in her expression, too quick for me to identify. We weren't asked, she said simply, and you made it very clear during our previous interactions that the Dominion did not require assistance from humanity. We respected your wishes. I remembered Captain Vasquez's smile. I remembered her question about when we had last built something new. I remembered my own arrogance, my certainty that we had nothing to learn from these primitive creatures who had barely mastered interstellar travel. The representative who arrived was not Captain Vasquez. He was a tall male with gray at his temples and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. His name was Director Chen, and he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who was accustomed to being obeyed.
Chronicler Solon Kai, he said, shaking my hand in the human fashion. I understand you've come to discuss the Vekar situation?
The Dominion requests. I hesitated. The words felt like stones in my throat. We request the assistance of the United Earth Coalition in our conflict with the Vekar Collective. We are prepared to discuss terms.
Sit down, Director Chen said. It was not unkind. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. Let's talk.
We talked for hours. I explained the scope of the Vekar threat, their numbers, their capabilities, their relentless advance. I showed him the data from our battles, the casualty figures, the projections that showed our complete extinction within 2 years. I offered everything we had: technology, territory, resources, political concessions. I offered to tear up the old treaties and rewrite them entirely in humanity's favor. Director Chen listened. He asked questions,
probing, intelligent questions about logistics and strategy and the psychology of the Vekar. He took notes on a small device that looked almost laughably primitive compared to our technology, and when I had finished, when I had laid bare the full extent of our desperation, he leaned back in his chair and was silent for a long moment.
"Chronicler," he said finally, "may I ask you a personal question?"
Anything. What do you think would have happened if we had approached the Dominion for help 70 years ago when we first met your people?
I did not answer. I could not answer truthfully without condemning myself.
I'm not asking to shame you, Director Chen continued. I'm asking because I want you to understand something. When your delegation came to our territory, when you offered us that treaty with its limits and restrictions and inspections, we knew what you were really saying. You were saying, stay small, stay weak, know your place. And we accepted because we weren't ready to challenge it.
"And now?"
He smiled. It was a gentle smile, but there was something beneath it, something vast and old and patient.
"Now we're ready."
He rose and gestured for me to follow. We walked through corridors that hummed with activity, humans and machines working in perfect coordination, moving with purpose I couldn't quite follow. Through observation windows I glimpsed things that made my heart stutter, construction yards that stretched beyond sight, filled with vessels unlike anything I had seen before, not ugly, not utilitarian, sleek and dark, and somehow hungry. When you gave us that treaty, Director Chen said as we walked, you thought you were containing us, limiting our growth. What you actually did was give us time. Time to develop without interference. Time to learn from your technology. Yes, we studied everything you showed us very carefully, without the pressure of your expectations. Time to prepare. Prepare for what? He stopped walking. We had reached a massive observation deck, and through the transparent walls I could see space. But not empty space. Space filled with ships, thousands of them, tens of thousands, moving in formations so precise they seemed choreographed, each vessel in perfect position relative to every other. For this, Director Shen said quietly, for the moment when the galaxy would need us. I stared at the fleet. I tried to count the ships and lost track. I tried to estimate their sizes and found myself revising upward again and again. These were not the small, ugly vessels I remembered from 70 years ago. These were warships, true warships, built with a singular purpose that was evident in every line of their design. This is... I could not finish the sentence. I did not have words. This is the second fleet, Director Chan said. One of 12 currently deployed. We have another 8 in reserve. 20 fleets, each the size of what I was seeing. The Dominion, at its height, had possessed perhaps 6 fleets of comparable scale. How? I whispered. We remember what it means to be weak, Director Chen said. We remember what it means to be afraid. Every generation of humans lives with the knowledge that the universe is vast and cold and indifferent, and that no one will save us but ourselves. It makes us motivated. He turned to face me fully, and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen in a human before. Not hostility, not arrogance, just certainty. The Coalition will help the Dominion against the Vakar, but I need you to understand something, Chronicler. We're not doing this for you. We're not doing this because of treaties or alliances or diplomatic obligations. We're doing this because the Vakar are a threat to all life in this galaxy, and we do not tolerate existential threats. I understand.
I don't think you do. Not yet. He clasped his hands behind his back. Your people have been fighting the Vekar for 3 years. In that time, you've lost
What, 1,000,000,000,000 citizens? 2,000,000,000,000? You've been driven from 1/3 of your territory. You've exhausted your resources, your fleets, your hope. I nodded, unable to speak. We're not going to fight the Vekar, Director Chan said. We're going to end them. The human fleet departed for Dominion space 47 hours later. I traveled with them aboard a vessel called the Remembrance. It was a flagship of sorts, though the humans seemed uncomfortable with that terminology. They preferred to describe it as a coordination platform, a mobile command center from which their operations could be directed. I spent most of the journey in a state of numb observation. The humans moved around me with efficient purpose, speaking in a mix of languages that my translators struggled to process. They ate their meals at regular intervals, slept in shifts, trained in combat simulations that were brutally realistic. And through it all, they remained calm. Not the forced calm of soldiers facing death, not the brittle calm of people in denial about their circumstances. Genuine, profound calm. The calm of people who knew exactly what they were going to do and had absolute confidence in their ability to do it. On the 3rd day of the journey, I encountered Captain Elena Vasquez. I recognized her immediately, though 7 decades had marked her. Her hair was white now, cut in the same practical style I remembered. Her face was lined, her movements slower, but her eyes, those storm cloud eyes, were exactly as I remembered them. "Chronicler Solon Kai," she said, and her voice still held that same quiet amusement. "I told you I hoped we would meet again." "Captain Vasquez," I inclined my head. "I did not expect to find you here." "Admiral Vasquez now, though I'm mostly retired," she smiled. "They asked me to come along, for continuity, they said. I think they just wanted someone who remembered what you were like when you were still certain you were our betters." I should have been offended. I was not. I was too tired for offense, and her words were too accurate for denial.
"We were arrogant," I said. "We believed ourselves beyond challenge, beyond consequence." "Yes." She moved to stand beside me at the observation port. The stars streaked past, distorted by our velocity. "Do you remember what I told you all those years ago about those who cannot imagine the future?"
I remember.
"I meant it kindly, you know. I wasn't trying to threaten you. I was trying to warn you." She sighed, and for a moment she looked every one of her years. "You were ancient and powerful and so very tired, and you didn't even realize it. You thought you had achieved permanence. You thought you had solved existence, and you stopped growing." While you continued, "We never stop. We can't. It's not in our nature." She turned to look at me directly. "We come from a world that tried to kill us constantly. Earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, disease, each other. We survived all of it. We adapted, we learned, and we carried those lessons with us into the stars."
What lessons?
That nothing is permanent, that safety is an illusion, that the moment you stop fighting to survive, you've already started dying. She placed her weathered hand on the viewport, her fingertips touching the cold glass that separated us from the void. "The Vikar think they're unstoppable. They've never encountered anything that could truly oppose them. They've never known defeat."
"Neither had the Dominion." "No, but you forgot what it felt like to be vulnerable. The Vikar never knew." Her eyes hardened. "They're about to learn." We reached the front lines on the 7th day.
The Vekar had pushed deep into what had once been Dominion core territory, systems I had known for centuries, worlds where I had walked and worked and studied. Now they were battlefields. Now they were graveyards.
The human fleet did not hesitate. There were no speeches, no ceremonies, no dramatic declarations. One moment they were traveling in formation, the next they were simply attacking.
I watched from the Remembrance's command center, surrounded by humans who spoke in clipped, efficient phrases I barely understood. Tactical displays showed the engagement in abstract terms, icons moving, lines intersecting, numbers climbing and falling. But I knew what those abstractions meant. I knew that each flash of light represented ships dying, beings dying, the fabric of reality itself being torn apart by weapons I could not comprehend.
The Vekar fought back. Of course they did. They had never known retreat. They threw themselves at the human lines with the same mindless ferocity that had crushed the Dominion's greatest fleets. Wave after wave of their vessels emerged from their occupied systems, a tide of destruction that seemed infinite.
The humans held. Not just held, advanced, slowly, methodically, implacably. They didn't fight like the Dominion had fought, with grand maneuvers and heroic last stands and commanders who led from the front. They fought like machines, like forces of nature, every action coordinated with every other action, every ship in perfect position, every weapon firing at optimal intervals. And when the Vekar adapted, the humans adapted faster.
How are they doing this? I asked Admiral Vasquez. We stood together on the observation deck, watching ships die in the distance. The Vekar countered everything we tried. They learned our tactics, our strategies.
So did we, she said. We've been watching this war for years, remember. We know how they think. We know how they adapt. And we've been practicing.
Practicing?
Simulations. Billions of simulations. Every possible scenario, every possible response, every possible outcome. Our tactical AI has been running them continuously for years. She smiled grimly. By the time we engaged the Vexar in reality, we had already defeated them 1 trillion times in simulation. This is just the confirmation.
The battle lasted for 3 days. When it was over, the Vekar offensive had been shattered. Not merely stopped, shattered. The human losses were significant, tens of thousands of ships, millions of personnel, but the Vekar had lost far more. For the first time since their emergence, they retreated. And the humans followed. I did not understand at first what I was witnessing. I thought it was a counteroffensive, a strategic push to reclaim lost territory. It was only as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months that I began to comprehend the scale of what humanity was doing. They were not trying to defeat the Vekar. They were not trying to drive them back or contain them or establish a new balance of power. They were hunting them. Every system the Vekar had occupied was retaken. Every world they had consumed was reclaimed. And when the human fleets arrived, they did not stop until every Vekar presence was eliminated. Not defeated, eliminated. Down to the last ship, the last station, the last trace of their existence. This seems, I struggled to find the appropriate word, excessive. Director Chen had joined us aboard the Remembrance for a strategic briefing. He looked tired, the first time I had seen any human display exhaustion since this campaign began. The Bedikar don't surrender, he said flatly. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat and rebuild. If we leave any of them alive, they will return, stronger, angrier, and next time we might not be ready. He met my eyes.
This isn't cruelty, Chronicler. This is survival. We will not leave a threat behind us that could one day threaten our children.
And if they offered peace?
They won't. They can't. It's not in their nature. He glanced at a tactical display where human fleets continued their relentless advance. But even if they did, we've learned that some enemies cannot be appeased. Some threats must be ended permanently. Your Dominion learned that lesson too late. We will not make the same mistake.
I watched the campaign unfold over the following months. I chronicled it, as was my duty, recording the battles, the strategies, the turning points. But I also recorded what I saw in the humans around me, the quiet determination, the absence of hatred. They did not glory in the destruction. They did not celebrate their victories. They simply worked, methodically and efficiently, until the job was done.
It was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. The Dominion had fought wars before. We had destroyed rival powers, conquered resistant species, imposed our will on those who opposed us, and in every conflict there had been passion, anger, pride, the emotional fuel that drives civilizations to violence. The humans had none of that. They fought without emotion. They killed without malice. They were not angry at the Vekar, not seeking revenge, not making a statement. They were simply removing a problem, as one might remove a tumor, as one might sterilize an infection.
One evening, I found Admiral Vasquez alone in one of the ship's observation lounges. She was staring out at a nebula, the remnants of a star that had died long before either of our species had evolved.
"Do you know what frightens me most about your people?" I asked, settling into a chair beside her.
Tell me.
It's not your fleets, it's not your weapons, or your strategies, or your numbers. It's this. I gestured at her calm face, her steady hands, her complete lack of visible distress. You're exterminating an entire civilization. Billions of Veskar are dying every day because of decisions made by people like you, and you feel nothing.
She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very soft.
I feel everything, she said. I feel all of it. The weight of every death, every choice, every consequence. I carry it with me constantly. She finally turned to look at me. But I cannot allow that weight to paralyze me. Because if I falter, if I hesitate, if I let my emotions override my judgment, more people will die. My people, your people, all the species who depend on the galaxy remaining stable.
How do you bear it?
Because I must. She smiled, and for the first time I saw the exhaustion behind her eyes, the same bone-deep weariness I had seen in my own reflection after centuries of chronicling tragedies. Humanity does not have the luxury of despair, Chronicler. We never have. Our history is a catalogue of horrors, wars, famines, plagues, catastrophes that should have destroyed us 100 times over. We survived because we learned to act despite our pain, to function despite our fear.
To do what must be done, regardless of how it feels.
That sounds lonely.
It is. She reached out and touched my arm. The same gesture she had made 70 years ago, a lifetime ago. But we're not alone anymore. That's something, at least.
The final battle of the Velakar War took place in their home system, a cluster of worlds they had occupied since before their expansion began. Human intelligence had tracked them there, following the traces of their retreat, mapping their remaining forces with terrifying precision.
I was there when the assault began. I watched from the remembrance as the human fleets encircled the system, cutting off every possible escape route. I watched as the Vekar threw everything they had left at the closing ring, desperate and savage and finally, afraid. And I watched as the humans annihilated them.
It took 17 hours. When it was over, the Vekar homeworlds were silent. Their fleets were debris. Their stations were wreckage. 4 years of war, trillions of deaths, entire civilizations brought to their knees, and it ended not with a dramatic final stand, but with the quiet efficiency of an extermination.
In the aftermath, the human fleets did not celebrate. They simply began the long process of cleanup, securing the system, scanning for survivors, ensuring that the threat was truly ended. Crews rotated out for rest, ships began the journey back to human space for repairs and refitting. Life continued.
I found Director Chen standing alone on an observation deck, staring at the ruined Vekar homeworld.
"It's done," I said. "Yes."
"How do you feel?"
He was quiet for a long moment. "Tired," he said finally, "and sad, and relieved, and—" He shook his head. "There's no word for what I feel. We just ended a species, an entire civilization wiped from existence. They were monsters, but they were also alive. They had a history, a culture, hopes and fears we never understood, and now they're gone forever."
You regret it?
"No." His voice was firm. "I don't regret it. They would have done the same to us, to all of us, if we had failed. But I mourn it. I mourn the necessity of it. And I hope," he turned to look at me, "I hope that someday we will live in a galaxy where such things are no longer necessary, where we can meet new species with open hands instead of weapons, where the first question is, what can we learn from each other, rather than, are they a threat?"
"Do you believe that will happen?"
"I don't know." He smiled slightly. "But I believe it's worth working toward, even if it takes generations, even if we never see it ourselves."
The return to Dominion space took several weeks. I spent most of that time in consultation with the remaining Dominion leadership, or what passed for leadership in the wake of our near extinction. The Council had been decimated by the war, its power structures shattered, its ancient certainties exposed as delusions. The humans were generous in their terms, more generous than I would have expected, more generous than we deserved. They asked for no territory, no tribute, no formal submission. They asked only for partnership, cooperation, a seat at the table as the galaxy began the long process of rebuilding.
"Why?" First Speaker Torak asked during the negotiations. He was old now, older than I had ever seen him, his once proud bearing bent under the weight of 3 trillion dead. "Why help us at all? We treated you as inferiors. We limited your growth, restricted your expansion, dismissed you as primitives. We gave you every reason to let us fall." Director Chen answered him. "Because we remember what it was like to be weak," he said. "We remember what it was like to look at the stars and wonder if we were alone. And we decided a long time ago that we would never be the species that left others to die, no matter what they had done to us."
That seems idealistic.
"It is," Director Chen smiled. "Humanity is an idealistic species, First Speaker. We believe in justice, in mercy, in the possibility of redemption. We believe that beings can change, that civilizations can grow, that the future can be better than the past." His smile faded. "But we are also a practical species. We know that idealism must be backed by strength, or it becomes weakness. We hope for peace, but we prepare for war."
We offer friendship, but we never forget that friendship can be betrayed." He leaned forward, and in his eyes I saw something I had seen only once before, in the eyes of Captain Vasquez 70 years ago. "The Dominion crossed a line once," he said quietly, "when you tried to contain us, to limit us, to define our place in the galaxy without our consent. We allowed it because we were not ready to challenge it, but we never forgot, and we learned." He paused. "The Vekar crossed a different line. They tried to destroy us, to destroy everyone, and you saw what happened to them."
First speaker. Torek's skin had gone pale. "Is that a threat?"
"No." Director Chen shook his head. "It's a promise. We will be your partners, your allies, your friends, if you let us. We will help you rebuild, protect you while you're vulnerable, share everything we have with you freely. But if anyone ever tries to subjugate humanity again, ever tries to limit our freedom or threaten our existence, we will respond, completely, finally, irreversibly." He stood, and his voice softened. "The Vekar are gone. Not defeated, not contained, not humbled. Gone. Erased from existence so thoroughly that in 1,000 years no one will remember they ever lived. That is what happens when you push humanity past its limits. That is what happens when you make us choose between our survival and yours." "And if we are good partners?" First Speaker Torek asked. "If we honor this alliance?" "Then you will have no better friends in the entire galaxy." Director Chen extended his hand. "We don't want to be alone, First Speaker. We never did. We want to share the stars with you, all of you. We want to learn from you, teach you, grow alongside you. We want to build something together that will outlast all of us." First Speaker Torek looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took it. "I am finishing this chronicle now, on a ship bound for what remains of my homeworld. The Dominion will survive, diminished, humbled, fundamentally changed, but alive. We will rebuild under the watchful protection of our new partners. We will learn to see humanity not as the primitives we once dismissed, but as the equals they have proven themselves to be. And I will remember. I will remember the small, ugly ship that first carried their delegation to Kalos Station. I will remember Captain Vasquez's knowing smile and the question she asked about when we had last built something new. I will remember the fleet that saved us and the calm efficiency with which they erased our would-be destroyers from existence. Most of all, I will remember what Director Chen said in his final meeting with our council. There is an old human saying, he told us, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We learned from our history, all of it, the triumphs and the tragedies, the heroism and the horror. We learned that the universe is harsh and survival requires strength. We learned that we are stronger together than apart. And we learned that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. He had looked around the chamber, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. The Vekar crossed a line. They declared war on all life in this galaxy. They chose annihilation as their goal and genocide as their method. And humanity responded, not out of hatred, not out of vengeance, but out of simple, practical necessity. We erased them from history. Not because we wanted to, not because we enjoyed it, but because we understood. We have always understood that some threats cannot be negotiated with, cannot be appeased, cannot be left to fester and grow.
The Vakar would not stop, could not stop, and so we stopped them, permanently, completely, forever.
He had smiled then, a tired, sad, human smile. We did not do this to prove a point. We did not do it to demonstrate our power. We did it because it was necessary, and we were the only ones who could. That is who humanity is. We are the species that does what must be done, no matter the cost, no matter the pain, no matter how long the road or how dark the night.
And when the job is done, we mourn the necessity. We grieve for what we had to destroy. We remember those we lost and those we took. And then we turn toward the future. And we keep building, keep growing, keep reaching for the stars.
Because that is what it means to be human.
The stars are quiet tonight. I can see them through my viewport, burning with their ancient fire, indifferent as always to the civilizations that rise and fall beneath their light. They do not remember the Vakar. They will not mourn them. In 1 billion years, there will be no trace that they ever existed.
But we will remember. We, the survivors, the dominion that nearly perished, the humans who saved us, all the species who witnessed what happened, we will remember. We will pass the story down through generations, a warning and a lesson and a testament to what can happen when the wrong line is crossed. The humans taught us something that our 11,000 years of dominance had caused us to forget. Strength is not just the ability to destroy. It is the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary and the will to carry it through completely. It is the courage to be kind when kindness is possible, and the ruthlessness to be terrible when nothing else will serve. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if the alliance between our peoples will endure, or if new threats will emerge to test us. I do not know if humanity's idealism will survive their growing power, or if they will become the very thing they defeated.
But I know this. The Vakar thought they were unstoppable. They thought they could sweep across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path, leaving nothing behind but silence. They thought they had found a species that could not resist them, an empire that could not challenge them. They thought wrong. They crossed one line, just one, and humanity erased them from history. As I watch the stars, I find myself wondering what other lines exist, what other boundaries should never be crossed, what other sleeping giants wait in the darkness, patient and quiet and terrifyingly capable. The humans are kind, I remind myself. They are generous and peaceful and genuinely want to share the galaxy with us. But I also remember the calm in their eyes as they annihilated the Vakar, the efficiency with which they executed their genocide, the complete absence of hatred or hesitation. They did not destroy out of anger, they destroyed out of necessity. And when it was done, they simply moved on. That is the lesson I will carry with me for whatever centuries remain of my long life. That is the truth I will report in my chronicles so that future generations may understand. Humanity is not a species to be underestimated. They are not a species to be dismissed, contained, or controlled. They are something new in the galaxy, something that has never existed before. A species forged by struggle, hardened by catastrophe, unified by necessity. A species that carries their history with them, all of it, and uses it to prepare for the future. They are kind. They are patient. They are willing to forgive,
to teach, to share, to build.
But they are also prepared for anything, for everything.
And the stars themselves would do well to remember that.
This chronicle is complete. Let it stand as witness to what was, what is, and what may yet come to be. Let it remind all who read it that the universe is vast and strange and full of wonders, and that among those wonders, humanity may be the strangest and most wondrous of all.
A species that looks at the darkness between the stars and sees not fear, but possibility. A species that stares into the void and refuses to blink. A species that, when pushed to the edge of extinction, does not merely survive, it transcends.
I am the Solon-Kai, last of the High Chroniclers, witness to the rise of humanity.
And for the first time in 900 years, I am hopeful for the future.
Not because the threats have ended, they never do, but because I have seen what happens when those threats push too far.
And I know now that humanity will be there, watching, waiting, preparing,
Ready to do whatever must be done.
For as long as the stars continue to burn.